So sometimes we can have so much evidence that a particular belief is true that it seems almost impossible that things could be any other way. But what I've learned over the years is that at the root of every major transformation is an uprooting of certain deeply held beliefs that we hold in our subconscious mind. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why certain beliefs reinforce themselves and how they do it, and how we can shift, especially stubborn beliefs, if we want to experience change and transformation in our lives. So, as I learn more and more about the nature of this reality, I realize that it truly is a choose your own adventure game, and that our entire purpose here on this planet is to allow consciousness to experience different scenarios. And so we do have a high level purpose, but then below that, we get to choose what we want our purpose in life to be and what we want to experience. The reason why that's so challenging is because the way we're designed, our beliefs actually give structure to our ego, and they allow us to have this wonderful experience that we're having in the 3D. So without deeply held beliefs, we would literally be transforming every second. In order for us to experience uniformity and continuity, we have to kind of secure and anchor our beliefs about our past and our future. So those of you who are into this content understand at this point that all we are experiencing ever is the present moment. So anything that we're thinking about the past, anything that we're thinking about the future is taking place in our imagination. We can only experience this moment. But in order for this moment to be stable, we have to rely on our beliefs about the past and our beliefs about the future. For example, I'm sitting here as a melanated woman who is an engineer. I have these ideas about who I am that allow me to present myself in a certain way to you. But in order for that to be the case, I have to have a deeply held belief that I actually went to school for engineering and that I have this history that I hold in my imagination. And I have to believe that, in the next several moments or several years, I'm going to have a certain type of experience. It just stabilizes my personality. And so we are given the gift when we show up here on earth of being given that ego. So we're born to parents who hold certain beliefs, certain traditions. I believe that we choose those parents. And as part of us interacting with them, they help us establish who we are. They help us establish our ego, and it helps to guide us through life. So having stubborn beliefs, having an ego, having a sense of who you are is not something to be looked at negatively, in my opinion. It's something that stabilizes your experience here. Now, the issue comes in when we forget that this is just an ego that we're using to have an experience, and we think it's actually who we are. So I like to use analogies a lot. The analogy I would use for this is a VR headset, right? So now VR headsets have gotten super advanced, and you put it on and it shows you this programmed reality, right? And if you get really immersed in the game, you can forget that you can remove the VR headset, right? And you see people like using these VR headsets that are poorly designed and like running into stuff and injuring themselves. But my point is, when you put on that headset, it allows you to experience a certain reality, but it's not permanent. You can always remove it in order to return to the real reality. Similarly, these minds, these egos, these brains, these bodies are like a VR headset that our soul put on. And we can experience this and think that it's all there is, not understanding that it can be reprogrammed, just like a VR headset. And so, because the experience is so real and so tangible, and we forget that we've even put on a VR headset, we can sometimes just assume that things are unchangeable. And this actually helps with the experience, although I believe there are many of us at this moment in history that are rediscovering our higher selves and our soul selves. So if we're in this VR, this virtual reality experience as a soul, and we don't realize that we have the power to make adjustments to the experience, we can take off the headset, look at it and say, well, I'd like it to be brighter, or I'd like to put in a different game or whatever. We can feel very, very stuck. So I want to share how to take off the VR headset and reprogram it so that you can have different experiences. That's what we're doing when we investigate those subconscious beliefs. We bring them to the surface, we examine them, and we make tweaks to them so that we can experience a new and different reality. This can be extremely hard to believe. Like I said, beliefs reinforce themselves. Now, that's the other part of this I want to talk about. So, the reason why beliefs have to work so hard, beliefs literally fight for their lives, is because without them being firmly rooted, neither are you. And I think this is where a lot of mental issues come up. People don't have a well-rooted sense of reality for whatever reason. Their VR headset is malfunctioning and they're unable to stabilize their ego here. They're still a complete soul, but as far as their experience goes in the 3D, they sometimes have issues stabilizing themselves. So whatever belief you adopt, beliefs that you adopt as a child, beliefs that you adopt because of certain things that you observe, you select those beliefs because they make the most sense to you or they seem necessary for your survival. And then they go on a mission to never be removed and never be challenged. How do they do that? So I talk about something called the reticular activating system, right? So our subconscious knows who we are. Our subconscious selves hold all the data that went into selecting our beliefs, all of the beliefs that we've subsequently selected. And then the reticular activating system takes that and uses it to tell the conscious mind what to pay attention to. So we have billions and billions and billions of inputs, potential inputs that come into our experience, right? But we don't see everything. We could literally be in the same room as another human being, sitting right next to them and have a completely different experience for that reason. So that reticular activating system says, okay, let me look in the subconscious mind and see what this person has chosen to believe, has chosen to use to build their identity. And let me show them things that reinforce that belief. So if, for example, I have a belief that I am a beautiful woman and it's deeply ingrained, right? Every time I see someone look at me, I'm going to assume that it's because they think I'm beautiful. If I have a deeply rooted belief that I'm hideous, then every time I see someone look at me, I'm going to assume it's because they think I'm hideous. So I can take the same input and interpret it two different ways because of my subconscious beliefs and take it as evidence, right? Similarly, let's say I have a belief that life is hard, right? I could interpret any inconvenience as like this monumental thing that is acting upon me. But if I have a subconscious belief that life should be fun and it should be easy, I'll walk into a situation with a completely different attitude and interpret the inputs I'm getting completely differently, which causes me to make different decisions, me to think about things a certain way, and it can literally transform my entire experience as a human being. Another thing to think about is the fact, and this is if you want to get into the science, there's nothing that we experience with these bodies and brains, or with these bodies. There is nothing that we experience in the physical body. Every time we interact with this environment, it sends a signal to our brain that we then interpret, which is why we have things like, people who can't feel physical touch because they don't have the receptors in their brain to interpret the experience that way. But every time we smell something, every time we see something, every time we touch something, and it elicits these emotions in us, we're not actually experiencing that with our bodies. We're experiencing that with our brains. And we can look at our whole experience as, like I said, this VR headset through which we are interpreting inputs. And I say all that to say that we have a lot of control over that interpretation. And it is hard to believe until you transform a deep-seated subconscious belief and you watch everything around you change. It's almost unbelievable and hard to explain. And the thing that makes it tricky to explain as a content creator is that if I were to walk you through all the different steps that led up to a transformation, a major transformation in my life, you would say, oh, well, that makes sense. On the other side of it, it seems to make sense. But when you are facing a deeply held belief that is interfering with your ability to experience life a certain way, it can seem insurmountable. But really, I think the way that we should look at it is, yeah, it's sturdy. Beliefs can be quite sturdy. They can be quite well grounded and reinforced, because if you've held a belief for a long time, like I said, your reticular activating system has been repeatedly drawing your attention to the things that tell you that that belief is true. But instead of feeling like or looking at it as though, you've got all this evidence that this belief is true, so you can't change it, look at it as just super sturdy. Think of it as like living in a house, right? A very well built house. You want to tear it down and build a new one. That's how our beliefs can be. And the flimsier beliefs, the beliefs that we haven't really put much energy into, are kind of like a mobile home. You can just hook it up to a truck and pull it away and replace it with another one. But some beliefs that we have are so well rooted, they're like this huge castle. Let's say there's a castle that you want to tear down and remove. Much bigger, much more daunting task, but not impossible. Instead of just hooking up a truck to it and pulling it away, you may have to demolish it using heavy machinery and explosives. And it's the same way with these deeply rooted beliefs. It's not impossible to tear it down and build a new one. It just takes a little bit more work. So if we think about how we begin to transform deeply rooted beliefs, my method is to start with looking at my life and asking myself if I'm pleased with every aspect of it. If there's an aspect of my life that I'm unhappy with, I look at that aspect and I ask myself, what would I need to believe in order to have the experience I want to have in that area? And I just let my mind go free, right? That's our unique ability as human beings, is to use our imaginations to step outside of our current circumstance and view it objectively. And so I take a look and I say, well, I would probably need to believe X, Y, and Z. And immediately the deep-seated beliefs that I have that go against those new beliefs that I need come to the surface. So then I'm able to bring those up from my subconscious and begin to question them. And it's as simple as that. As you begin to look for evidence that something else could be true, you naturally begin to challenge that subconscious belief, and you begin to send a signal to your reticular activating system that you want to start seeing different evidence. And at first, it seems kind of off because, you start with a lot of resistance, right? And so you feel like you've got two sets of information. And so you just keep digging, chipping away, digging, questioning, looking for the opposite evidence until that belief begins to shift. And one thing that's super important as you're going through this process is patience. Because for a long time, it can still seem like nothing is happening with that belief. And you can still be getting more evidence that the old belief is true. For some of my beliefs that I've shifted to transform my life, it's taken literal years to change the belief. And the funny thing about it, it's when I stop thinking about it that the belief actually shifts, because I've taken it from this effort that I'm consciously putting forth to sitting it inside my subconscious mind where I no longer have to think about it consciously. And then it could be, 6 months since the last time I even thought about whatever situation I'm trying to transform. And I realize that it's changed. And I'm like, oh, wait, I no longer feel that way. I now feel like I have plenty of time to deal with this issue, or I now feel like I have the ability to be super organized around this. And I didn't even notice. And that's because I've taken the conscious effort and shifted it into a subconscious belief. So now it's no longer something I have to think about. It's something that I embody. It's part of my ego now. It's now part of my personality because I have requested from my reticular activating system, from my VR headset, that we now program things this way. And it works. Like, it seems far-fetched, but my life in certain areas looks completely different than it did before. And I've been able to repeat this process over and over and over again. So beliefs reinforce themselves as part of this VR headset, as part of this experience that we're having as human beings in order to stabilize us. But that does not mean that they're not changeable and that we don't have a lot of agency over our beliefs and how they impact our choices and what we perceive and what we pay attention to and what we experience in this reality. There's a lot more to this, and I've been wanting for months to make a video about the nature of reality and why this is the case, like the actual makeup of all the dimensions. And once we understand that, how powerful we are with regards to changing our reality. Like, literally, I feel like I have hacked the universe. It's such a big concept. Like, it's taken me literally decades to be able to fully conceptualize and then also apply what I've learned, and get the evidence that it is true and that it's real and that I can use it to change my life and change the lives of others. So for now, I'm breaking it down in bite-sized pieces that are easy to digest, hopefully. Let me know in the comments if you felt like this video helped you, or if you plan to challenge some of your deep-seated beliefs. Choose an area of your life that seems especially stubborn and that you have wanted to change for the longest amount of time, and start to ask yourself, this is such an important question: what would I need to believe in order to change this experience? And then just start listing what you think would need to be true, and then allow the resistance to come up so that you can then start to question the beliefs that you have around that situation. I hope this helps.